This is Filmmaker Stories podcast brought to you by JB Audio PostProduction. My name is Yanis Balodis and I have helped many filmmakers bring their film's sonic vision to life. In this series, I asked them to join the studio and tell us their very own unscripted story. Kaile is a writer, actor and producer who overcame great odds to create a debut feature film from scratch, including sourcing the finance and getting it sold to the distributors worldwide. With colleagues from that debut, he has now started a new film production company called Milking First.
Writing's been in my blood from birth. I think I remember being in primary school and I used to get given time out of lessons to just go away on the school computer and write my own incomprehensible short stories that had no grammar in them. It was just about me and my best mate going on adventures. So I think I always wanted to write, and I don't really think I cared about what kind of format at first. And then when I left uni, I think, as most people would in creative professions, they panic and they wonder how the hell am I going to get involved in whatever industry I want to be involved in, and I just looked at every opportunity going. So with writing, it was always really there. With producing, and I think a lot of people will say this who have gone into the producing world, it almost became a necessity byproduct of wanting to just get projects off the ground, because eventually you have to make a decision with, am I going to keep waiting for that phone to ring? Am I going to keep waiting for one person to get back to me on email? Or am I just going to start initiating something myself? And it is pretty daunting, but I think I did find myself starting to enjoy some of the producing aspects. It's kind of a symptom of just wanting to get my writing going. And I think sometimes that is the path you have to take instead of waiting for an opportunity to come along. The first sort of projects we did after I left uni, it was kind of trying to find work anywhere, and slowly you kind of build up a network of people you, I suppose, are like-minded, and they've gone through similar frustrations themselves. So you can eventually, I suppose, decide as a group to wear multiple hats and all sort of sit down and go, yeah, let's make something ourselves. And I was lucky enough to meet a group of people through various means, working as an extra on film sets, going onto social media and working on other people's sort of short films and things like that. And eventually me and an acting friend of mine, Rich Keeble, we decided to make a web series and just try it out. I think around 5 to 10 years ago, web series were very much sort of having their moment, and we thought we'd join in with that. And we tried making a web series and putting together the whole thing, just me and him. So we ended up being producers again by necessity. And as much as it was a small thing compared to a feature, it still was a great education, because you have to go through so many of the processes from, just crewing up and getting a cast together. But I think the main thing with a producer is just the general logistics and making sure the project gets finished. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson we learned from doing just the web series is, as much as you get people on board and everyone's always excited to be part of something at last, everyone in any actor or writer or sound mixer or everything, everyone's just so keen to be on a project. But ultimately, they'll come on, they'll do their bit, but that isn't getting finished unless you push every single day. So you have to wake up maybe, every day and just go, I need to do something on this project to push it to completion. And I think that's why you find a lot of short films or web series get shot and then don't ultimately get finished, because the producers suddenly realise that they might not have that drive to keep pushing every day, even when it's pretty depressing and grim to get it done. I think me and Rich, when we did a sort of post-mortem on our web series, which was called All in the Method, I think the one thing we realised is we both had a kind of drive to see something to completion. For me, I think that came from being stubborn, and I have a competitive nature in myself. Have that commitment to going, I need to complete that web series. That still needs that tweak in the edit. That still needs the sound adjustment. So I think I found that is the thing that allows me to get stuff done. And I think that's that trait that you need as a producer. You just need to be so persistent and stubborn that you'll finish something against all odds. From the web series and the sketches, ultimately you reach a point where you wonder to yourself, where are these things going to take us? How are they going to get us to where we want to be as an actor, as a writer, as a producer? Of where's the next steps for us? And initially we thought it would be, as a comedy duo and trying to get agents to look at us. And I think especially back then, we suffered a lot of rejections. I wouldn't even call them rejections, just being ignored. And something I read years ago was Stephen King's novel On Writing. One thing he did when he was trying to obviously get noticed was he had a corkboard, I think, above his writing station where he would just pin all his rejections, and that worked for him. He liked to see, the opposition. All the times he had been rejected motivated him. For me, I don't think that works so well. I think for me, I like to eventually get a win and make sure I try to appreciate that as a big gain. Okay, I'll get 6 rejections over the course of a month, but hey, I might come up with a new idea for a show. I might get a response that isn't a rejection, but maybe they're giving me some notes back, or maybe even I've been lucky enough and been offered, oh yeah, we'll do a show profit with you in a theatre or something, just something even small, and just try to really keep focusing on the success. I think when it got into our feature film, I think it probably changed a bit, because the rejections are so much more, I suppose, devastating. When you're working on something, every time you feel like you're finally getting somewhere, you might be hit 2 steps back, and it's hard, and then to celebrate a small success because you feel like you're just getting nowhere. You're wading through tar sometimes. I made sure I had a very active social life. I made sure I didn't just lose connection with my friends, because we could have a great day out, a great evening, a great holiday, and then that would rejuvenate me, make me forget about the rejections, make me forget about the hardship that my feature was enduring. So I think that was the pivot, really. I think it's to not forget that what happens in your film, theatre, TV, whatever industry you want to be in, don't let it rule your whole life, I guess. Our latest project is called Criminal Audition. It's a feature film, but it stems from a short play I wrote way back in 2009. And I adapted that play into a feature-length play. And a lot of people had said to me that this had potential as a feature film. A couple of years I put off that notion because it's so daunting. How do you even begin to make a feature film? It's easy enough to get a group of people together for a short film or a comedy sketch, but how do you even begin to make a feature film? It's such a behemoth. And it took a lot of convincing my mind was ready. So I eventually decided, I'm going to have to produce this. Sam would be the director. We spent years and years trying to get it off the ground, trying to find funding, trying to just work out the logistics of, again, making a feature film. And I think we have different ideas of when you could argue we started production, or pre-production, should I say. But you could easily say from 2012 to now, 2020, we've been working on that film, and only now have we, released it to a festival premiere last year in August, and got a sales agent, and now subsequently on the brink of distributing it globally. I think when making Criminal Audition, I was very lucky in finding someone like Sam, who is a writing partner that, as much as we are completely different in how we write and how we approach just our day-to-day working ethic, we seem to have quite a good marry when it came to just actually producing stuff together. And obviously working as a duo is great, and you can get through bits and pieces, and the communication is very simple. But when suddenly you get to the production stage of something, me and Sam bring on 2 new producers, and suddenly we bring on 50, 60 crew members and cast members. Suddenly you have this huge vessel that somehow you need to make sure everything's turning and everyone understands and is happy and comfortable. And as a producer, I think I have many flaws, but one of the things I knew I was quite good at was communication and catching up with people and making sure each department is happy. But nevertheless, it is because of the budgets, you can't win, and you're almost hoping that all these personalities and different sort of opinions and just somehow work itself out. You can't be a control freak. You have to hope some people can pick up those pieces as well. And it was a really big challenge for me, especially when we started shooting, to just let go and have a bit of trust in everyone else. Remind yourself that you brought these people on for a reason. You know, hopefully you've taken enough time to vet them and make sure they're the people you wanted. And eventually it's having that word with yourself, I suppose, to say, maybe it's good to have a collaborator. Maybe it's good to have someone shoot down that and ask you questions. Why is that like this? And it will hurt initially, and it did. It did hurt initially when you know, Sam started to be like, well, why does this character do this? And I was like, well, because, and I found myself, he was asking the right questions. And even though I was angry at first, eventually, as I said, me and Sam just found this pitter-patter where we were driving towards the same type of film. But I can always vouch that the more you let go, the better the project will be. And that's not to say you'll lose all your input. It's just to say other people are good too. It's a really interesting path when I look back on what we've done, because if we were to take me and Sam, the director of Criminal Audition, as a duo, I think I'm often the pessimistic one, the one who sometimes is a bit more downbeat about our chances of making it. Now, I will caveat that it's not always the worst trait to have, because it has made me always realistic in our ambitions, and also, I suppose, really gives me an attention to detail, because I want to make everything absolutely perfect before we submit something, before we show someone something, because I'm always like, it won't pass the test unless we get it absolutely perfect. And it's interesting when I think back to when we first started this, that the film industry seems so under lock and key. You don't really know where your in is. You know, as we'll probably get into, there isn't really a blueprint for making a feature film. But I think I remember even when we started in pre-production, if I was to ask myself, did I really believe we would get distribution, we would even shoot it and get it to a certain level? Probably not. I think I still probably thought in the back of my mind, you know, this has got a high level of potential to come out looking like a student film, or, you know, not even being finished, it just having lots of patchy moments in it where that scene didn't work out. I think even when I was filling in our BFI tax relief, they feel so official. I just thought, there's no way the BFI are going to watch this film and read my answers and look at my budget and think, this is a genuine film that's going to get given the stamp of approval. And yet, every time I doubted that, we managed to get a success. The BFI came back and went, it is a film, which surprised me. And the same goes to all the subsequent things that happened to Criminal Audition since. And so I think that's something to take on board if you are thinking of starting out making a film. And it does seem hazy and a little bit jumping into the fog. All those things that seem impossible, as you slowly get closer to them, they don't seem like mountains. They do start to look more like a very jumpable hurdle or fence. Most of those years were spent pre-production, trying to find funds, trying to find people to believe in us, really. And look, making mistakes. One of the things we always had to keep in our minds, you wake up every day and nothing's moving unless you move it. But to target on two particular moments that really kind of made me doubt that we were going to get this over the line, trying to find financing. We took a risk, we took a big gamble where we effectively worked out with our other two producers that we felt like we had eventually found the funds through Indiegogo, a couple of loans and private investments to shoot the film. But we didn't have the funds to finish the film in post. And eventually I made this call to just do it, which I don't recommend, probably. It's not good for a producer's mental health when they, even though when you're shooting it and you're on day 6 of a film, you're still like, I have no way of finishing this film. And the gamble and the logic behind it was that loads of people have a script, loads of people have ideas of what they want to do, but if we actually had some great content shot, and then I approached investors and went, look, This is already done. You don't even have to worry about, oh, will it get shot well? This is it. You just give us the finishing funds. Here's all the post-production we've got planned. Everyone's just waiting. And this will get done in around 5 months. The second you hand over and sign that check. And it worked. But it wasn't without its pitfalls, because the first investor that I approached after we had shot the film, he eventually turned around one day and said, I'm afraid I'm going to, Dragon's Den style, I'm out. It's not for me. And I think that will always be the lowest moment of making Criminal Audition, because as much as in pre-production you were like, oh, I'm so low, we still haven't made the film, to get it shot and then think, this isn't going to happen. I've just spent loads of other people's money and loans and everything on a film that isn't going to be finished. That was such a low moment. We eventually managed to find an investor, so we did get over that hump. But I would say the other moment that really things you've learnt from the feature, post-production, I think I truly didn't understand, the backs and forths that a film goes through at that point. We started to draw up a sort of structure on how we would run things for new films. And, looking back on what we did for Criminal, for pre-production, I think we've already, in highlighter, put must include post teams in the pre-production. Now, look, for Criminal, we simply didn't have the budget to have that kind of, to be able to consult and get some of the post-production teams on board early enough. But it's something that will help so much to have a greater level of consultancy, be able to talk to the post teams. This is what we're looking at doing. How do you feel about it? What tips can you give us to prepare? Because ultimately, the tips you get will then bleed into your production. You'll probably end up saving yourself another 10% of your budget in a way. I think, obviously, with the success of Criminal Audition, we're hoping now we'll be allowed a bit of a wider berth when it comes to the budgets and when it comes to, I suppose, a broader crew and logistics, meaning we'll be able to kind of have a bit more time in certain areas where maybe we had to rush before. With Criminal Audition, we suddenly found we had the location available only for these 3 weeks, so we had to make sure we were ready for those 3 weeks, and it was quite a manic rush. And obviously, any film never goes exactly to plan, but having a bit longer to plan out our strategy is going to be lovely. Another thing that we are looking forward to doing, which we didn't get to do with Criminal Audition, is reshoots. Is just being able to go back and go, you know what, maybe we needed that scene after all, and get people back and piece it together again. We didn't have that luxury, and we would love the opportunity to be able to tinker with the product. Because one of the things that came up with Criminal Audition when we spoke to certain sales agents was some of them who liked the film and wanted to sign us sometimes had caveats, and they would say things like, but we would ultimately like you to maybe either go back to the edit and include a little cold open, or maybe film a new scene for the opening. And as I'm listening to them say these things, I'm like, we have no budget left and we can't do that, so absolutely no. And when it comes to post-production, I think, obviously, having a post-production supervisor to take that off me, but also I think trying to unify it a bit and put it more under one roof if we can. More closer together, and a team talking to each other more consistently would be something we'd love to do. I think I've never had more frustration than having 6 or 7 different companies or departments all working on your feature at the same time and getting them to communicate and understanding, especially when it got into the color grading and the visual effects, and sometimes having to go back a step when we had to make a change and then informing the sound team. And then I just felt like I was turning pages and making progress, but then the tunnel was being extended more and more. It felt like, oh, great, we've done that shot, but somehow we've made 2 more shots for ourselves. It never ended. It never ended. So in future, a lot more consultancy and budget on post. Thank you. But also there's a lot of technology we're looking into now. One being the virtual camera, which we would love to use in production and in post-production. Being able to do some previs and being able to map out scenes and understand what we're shooting before we even shoot it, it'll save us so many days and save our DOP a lot of headaches as well. The one thing we initially thought was we wanted to be as candid as possible, as open with everyone that was going to be coming on board to work with us. I think we all had come from short films and sketches and web series, and I think we all had ideas of what hadn't worked on productions before, what had things that frustrated us, and one of those things was, you know, when producers are a little bit hazy with how a production's going to be, maybe oversell it, maybe undersell it, and we just wanted to be as candid as possible to everyone who was going to be a member of the crew or cast, but we weren't under any kind of ignorance that Criminal Audition wasn't going to be a massive education for us. Like, we were going to learn so many things we didn't know. But I think we just wanted to try and get as many protocols in place before we started Criminal Audition to ensure that we were giving it our best shot. But I think the one thing that I've learnt a lot from coming out the other end of Criminal Audition is, look, first and foremost, anyone sort of on the fence of being a producer or taking that plunge, I wholeheartedly recommend it, because being a producer is one of the most satisfying ways to just give yourself a crash course in every film department possible. Because by being a producer, you have to see each department's unique stresses and aggravations and turmoil. So it certainly allows you to have an appreciation for each person's role. We wrapped on Criminal Audition and completed the film, I think, in around March 2019. And afterwards, you know, as new filmmakers, we were very confused about what the next step was and how do you even go about getting distribution. So the first thing that I think everyone looks at is maybe getting a bit of awareness for the film, festivals. One of the things I was keen to avoid doing, and I know this might sound harsh, but I think there can be part of you that when you've completed something and you're so overjoyed that you kind of want to do the thing where you apply to every festival because you want the kudos and you want the laurels and you want all the things on your poster. But, and this is just me, I think that's a mistake, because ultimately what you're doing there is just trying to make yourself feel better about the film rather than actually give it a direct route. And so what we did is we only applied for a select few festivals, and we only applied for ones that we actually felt were of a scale that would allow us to be maybe noticed. And that's not to say the other festivals don't serve a purpose and aren't a great platform, but we were very limited with our budget for festival submissions. And we didn't want to go down a path where we were screening at 10 festivals internationally, and then 6 of them we would be like, what did we really get from that? And so we applied for around 4 or 5, and, you know, we got some rejections. And thankfully, London Fright Fest picked us up, and they wanted us to be part of their First Blood section, which is for first-time directors. But the second we got that acceptance, we actually stopped even thinking about submitting to other festivals, because we knew we could then focus all our energies on making sure that Fright Fest was the place that we got our name out there. We really put all our eggs in the basket. And so we spent a long time sending out emails, sending out screening copies online, because you have to realise that a lot of sales agents or reviewers want to go to Fright Fest, but they can't always make it. So you try to sort of, I suppose, give them no option but to review it, or but to give you a bit of press. And also just make sure that we were trying to give people as much information as possible about the production. And I wanted to say, this is a bit of an underdog film. We made this on quite a low budget. It gives a bit of context to how it's been put together. That's really how we played our festival strategy. And from Fright Fest, we got offers from sales agents, and then we picked the one that we felt was again adequate for us and would suit us. And as far as other sort of social events go, and as far as pushing the film elsewhere, we also did what we called an industry premiere. just before Fright Fest, which was a sort of behind closed doors, invite only screening. And we basically made up a guest list of industry professionals that we really wanted to see the film. And again, they don't all have to be sales agents or distributors, because you have to think that this is not just Criminal Audition, this is about our futures. So let's invite DOPs, let's invite production companies and kit hire companies and everything, because we want them to know that we're around now, we're here, and here's what we've produced, you know, on a limited budget. So imagine what we can do with more. When making Criminal Audition, we could do what we wanted with the script. We could change genre halfway through. We could have the protagonist die after 20 minutes. We could do anything we wanted to. But ultimately, you have to think ahead. You have to think about, how am I going to sell this? So I think me and Sam almost ended up doing half and half. We had an adventure together where we went, let's do this daring thing where we're going to almost flip the genre on its head halfway through. But we knew that ultimately we had to sell this film. So we knew our ending had to be a certain way. We knew we had to hit certain markers as far as on a beat sheet, you know, when you want to bring in your antagonist, how you want to ratchet the tension up towards the end of the film. I think you still need to think about your wider audience. Look, it's up to you. If you don't, then just be prepared that you may not get a sales agent and distribution. It's sort of making sure you put elements in that you know will please sales agents, but also making sure you don't absolutely stifle all the fun you want to have. When we finished Criminal Audition and when people came out of the premiere, because I was sat at the back, I could sort of stand outside at the exit, and as people were leaving, I heard people debating character choices and things like that. And I didn't really care if some people came out and went, oh, I didn't really like it, or if they came out and went, I loved it. I kind of just care about people having conversations and debating a choice, a moment in the film, and I think I really enjoy that. The biggest fear I have now with what's happened this year is that budgets and, I suppose ultimately it's something like the BFI tax relief, if that was to be considered and potentially slashed, you know, whether that be a smaller percentage, I think that's something I fear, because especially for indie filmmakers, to be able to go to an investor and say, listen, without doubt, when we complete this film, we'll already get 20-25% of our budget back before we've even had a sales agent or marketed it or anything, is such an amazing thing to have in your investor pack. And the same goes for, I suppose, co-productions. You know, many European countries I know of have excellent tax relief as well. You know, places like Latvia, I believe there's even a good tax relief in Tenerife. I think it's something like 40%. I'm not sure if that's been changed. If they were to go, I think it makes it much harder to get that initial round of funding done. With similar budgets that me and Sam worked on, what I'm foreseeing maybe, and what we're maybe looking at now with our new features, is you have to pitch them much more comprehensively and much more directly. I think sadly, sales agents and distributors, and funny enough, I was talking to a few very, very recently because of COVID-19, if they weren't picky already, being very picky in the sense of if you turn up with maybe even a horror comedy, they might just not even give it a second glance, because right now they're probably going to want a lot of real direct genre. They're going to want straight horror, straight thriller. They're going to want to not have any haziness in how to market your film. Because funny enough, that's something that came with Criminal Audition. We didn't set out to make it a horror. We made it a thriller, and during the edit, a lot of people started to say, it's looking a bit like a horror. And I think now, if we were to pitch that and say, oh, it's a bit of a thriller, it's a bit of a horror, I think a lot of sales agents would be like, please just make it one thing, so we can just know what the through line is. We know who we can pitch it, how to pitch it, what the poster will be, what the trailer will be, what the music will be already. Obviously, this could change as the film industry starts to ramp up again. But I think, especially in the next 12 months, I think it's going to be a very simple, only taking chances on projects that seem like they've got either a very good ensemble cast attached or has a very clear picture of what it wants to be as a film, even when completed. We're working currently on 3 films, sort of pitching them, putting together pitch decks, putting together scripts. There's one in particular we're focused on, which is, as we mentioned earlier, a straight up horror. So there can't be any comedy there. And me and Sam have been writing that together now for most of 2020. We even did a location scout last year, just trying to really get ahead of ourselves to make sure our pitch deck's quite accomplished, and we've thought of all angles. We've already got a sort of co-production in place for that, and so really now we're kind of working on ironing the details out. I can't really talk about too much what it will be about, but yeah, essentially it will be a very straight up direct horror, pretty chilling. It's interesting looking ahead actually with our plans for our future features. It's weird because with COVID-19, the idea of lockdown suggests isolation, when really I think the effects on the film industry will be that people just look further afield. There's no reason now, when people start to connect on a more grander scale via their computers, that you couldn't have post-production in the UK and then another team shooting out in Europe. I think there's going to be a lot more of that now. There are so many talented individuals around the globe, people who have very specialist skill sets that maybe as a normal hire into your London office, the woman or man is in Brazil. That wouldn't work. But now the need and the connectivity is there, and maybe it's always been there, but maybe the realization that you can just reach out to someone in, as I said, Brazil, who has this specialist skill set. I think you're going to now have a lot more co-productions, a lot more taking a production and almost fragmenting it off into different pieces. Ourselves as a new production company are looking to do exactly that. I don't think travel will be stifled too much, because the travel that essentially we'd do for our next film would only be to get over to a country and to get back, and we're adhere to all the rules and regulations we need to. It's not like we're talking about 18 flights. So I think it's actually the realization, I suppose, is the big thing. I think people have realized that you don't have to meet up in person all the time. You don't have to always book a swanky bar in London to have your important business meetings. You can just sit in your pajamas and speak to a person over the internet and actually come to the same conclusions, and if anything, further your projects for the better. During this time where you're very limited in what we can achieve right now, there's never a better time to maybe build the foundations, your own toolkit, I suppose, or toolbox for what you want to do. I mean, if there's ever a time now to have several Zoom and Google Hangouts with potential collaborators, discover who is going to work like you, who suits you, build pitch decks, iron out those scripts that you've left in drawers for ages, put together budgets and teach yourself how to do a budget, how to put together a pitch deck, find and speak to concept artists. I mean, build that comprehensive package where at least in yourself, you know, when you do start go pitching to people and trying to find funds and trying to find collaborators, that you've got this bulletproof pack that you have put together, and you've got the time at the moment.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. The aim for the podcast is to provide a platform for first-time filmmakers to tell their stories, share their thoughts, knowledge and views, but most importantly, support and encourage others to follow their dreams. So please, like, share, rate and leave comments, but most importantly, subscribe so you don't have to miss the next episode. Until next time.